There is a painting you may have seen once in passing and then looked away from immediately. Not because it is uninteresting, because it is the opposite of uninteresting, because something about it reaches through the frame and does something to you that most paintings, however beautiful or disturbing, do not quite manage to do. The figure is massive, filling the canvas, both hands gripping a small human body, teeth already buried in the flesh, the face turned outward, wild-eyed, pupils enormous, expression caught somewhere between frenzy and terror, as though the thing doing the consuming is as frightened as the thing being consumed. It is called Saturn devouring his son. The most disturbing thing about it is not what is in the image, it is where the image was found and how. Francisco Goya painted Saturn devouring his son sometime between 1819 and 1823, when he was in his mid-70s, nearly deaf, living alone on the outskirts of Madrid in a house he had purchased from a deaf man, a fact the locals had preserved in the property's name. They called it the Quinta del Sordo, the house of the deaf man. Goya painted Saturn directly onto the plaster wall of his dining room. He never signed the work, he never exhibited it, he never explained it in letters or conversation or anything that has survived. He painted it in the room where he ate his meals. Surrounded by 13 other paintings, he applied to the walls of that house in the same period, a series of works so dark in tone, so disturbing in subject matter, that when scholars eventually gave them a collective name, they called them simply the Black Paintings. Goya died in 1828. The house was inherited, sold, changed hands. Saturn remained on the dining room wall. The mythology is ancient. Saturn, the Roman equivalent of the Greek Titan Kronos, received a prophecy at the beginning of time. His own children would overthrow him. One of them would take his throne, end his reign, do to him precisely what he had done to his own father. His solution was literal. He ate them. Each child, as it was born to his wife Ops, he took and swallowed whole. He did this to 5 children before the 6th, Jupiter, was hidden by Ops and replaced with a stone wrapped in cloth, which Saturn swallowed without noticing the substitution. Jupiter grew to adulthood, returned, forced Saturn to vomit up his 5 siblings, led the war against the Titans, and took the throne of the universe. The prophecy fulfilled itself. The thing Saturn had been trying to prevent, he had only delayed, and his method of delay, consuming his own children, became the act for which he was remembered through every subsequent century of Western art. Goya was not the first painter to take the myth as his subject. Peter Paul Rubens had painted it in 1636, and the Rubens version, now in the Prado, not far from Goya's own, is a picture of controlled violence. Saturn grips the child twists, screams, Saturn bites with purpose, with intention, with the deliberateness of someone doing something terrible but doing it carefully. Goya's Saturn is something different. The figure is not controlled. The eyes are the eyes of someone who has already lost. The hands grip not with purpose but with desperation, as though the act of eating is not an act of power but an act of panic. The reflex of a creature that knows it is already too late and cannot stop itself anyway. There is a theory, not proven, not disprovable, that Goya was painting himself. That Saturn, with his age-ravaged face and his wild eyes and his inability to stop the thing he is doing even as it destroys him, is a self-portrait of sorts. An old man who had spent his career in the service of kings, who had watched the war tear his country apart and seen the worst of what human beings could do to each other, who was now living alone in a house on the edge of a city, painting his private visions onto walls that no one was ever meant to see. The question of who Saturn is eating in that reading has no comfortable answer. In 1874, the Belgian artist Laurent Mathurin documented the paintings on the walls of the Quinta del Sordo. That same decade, the house's then owner commissioned a technical transfer. The paintings were carefully removed from the plaster, adhered to canvas, and eventually donated to the Spanish state. They were shown at the Exposition Universelle in Paris in 1878 and then sent to the Prado, where they have been ever since. The transfer process changed them. Restorers working on the canvases made decisions, repainted areas, filled gaps. Saturn as it exists in the Prado is not identical to what Goya painted on his wall. Portions of the lower body appear to have been significantly altered by the restorer. Whether Goya's original showed the figure differently, perhaps more ambiguously human, is a question that cannot now be answered. What is certain is that the painting was never finished in any conventional sense. It was not made for exhibition, it was not made for sale, it was not made for a patron or a church or a public that would one day stand before it and try to understand what they were looking at. It was made on a wall, in a private house, by an old man painting alone. The black paintings are displayed in the Prado in a dedicated room. Saturn hangs among the other 13. Each of the others is disturbing in its own way. Two men beating each other with clubs while sinking slowly into mud. A pilgrimage of disfigured figures moving through a grey landscape. A dog half buried, its head just visible above the surface of the earth, staring upward into an empty sky. But Saturn is the one people stop in front of. Saturn is the one that ends up in textbooks, on posters, in lists of the most disturbing paintings in Western art. There is an irony in this that would not have been lost on Goya. The image he made in the most private possible context, on the wall of a room he ate in a house outside the city, for no audience but himself, became one of the most reproduced images in the history of art. He made it for no one. The entire world has seen it. Nobody knows what Goya intended by painting Saturn on his dining room wall. The theories are numerous: political allegory, personal confession, a meditation on aging and time, a portrait of power consuming what it has created. All of them are plausible, none of them can be confirmed. What can be said is this: he lived with that image on his wall for the remaining years of his life. He woke up in that house, moved through those rooms, sat at the table beneath that painting. The wild eyes, the white-knuckled hands, the body already half consumed, and continued his days. Whether that was a choice or a compulsion or something so personal it has no adequate name, he took with him when he died. The painting has been in the Prado for over 150 years. Millions of people have stood in front of it and looked at what he made in private. None of them has been able to explain it. All of them remember it.